cross over to Normandy. We're going to get in geopolitical analyst Jeff Brown here. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us. Well, once again, we're saying this is the sixth time in not that long of a period of time that the French once again have taken to the street. Do you think that their efforts are going to make a difference in the Macron reform plan?
Well, first off, I would like, thank you for having me on. I'd like to point out that French strikes go all the way back to the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era. In fact, Napoleon actually encouraged strikes to keep the rich people, the rich, the bourgeois in place. So the French love striking, and the problem is they do this one day. Now this is today is the 7th. They're talking about doing it tomorrow again, and then on the 11th. But unless they just go out and don't leave, I'm not very optimistic. It looks good on film. I'm sure Ramin Mazaheri, your correspondent, is there reporting on it if he is back in Paris by now. But unfortunately, these one-off strikes like today and then next week and then in a couple of weeks look good, but they're not effective. So they would need a much more extended presence on the streets, I think, to have any kind of effect. To be honest with you, and I'm a French citizen, so I'm just speaking from the heart.
Well, let's talk about that. So what you're saying is something more sustained, more prolonged. Why don't we see that? I mean, we did see the yellow vests that they came out regularly. At the end of the day, do you think that they made a difference? And why do you think that we do not see, for example, these type of strikes being more sustained?
The yellow vests are really the only a movement in France that represents the broad interests of the French people. Even bourgeois and wealthier people agree with most of the demands of the yellow vests. All of these unions that you're seeing today refuse to even acknowledge the yellow vests. All the left, Mélenchon and all of the left-wing parties, they pretend that the yellow vests don't exist because the yellow vests expose them for what they are, and that is basically kabuki theater. It looks good, and I get messages on Telegram and Facebook and stuff. Oh, look what the French are doing. But it's really only the yellow vests who were out there every weekend getting killed, injured, hospitalized, imprisoned, beaten, who had an effect, and they're staying out of this because it's such a microscopic. They're talking about the retirement system, and that's not really what the yellow vests were all about. The yellow vests are essentially the French Revolution 220 years later.
So what you're saying is that there is a split, first of all, between those on the left. I'm assuming a lot of them out there today are from the left. And, for example, the yellow vests that look at a more long-term perspective of what needs to be done to change the situation on the ground, instead of what you're saying perhaps is more show than anything else. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The yellow vests are all about a completely holistic transformation of the French economy, the governance. They're basically, wanting to do what Napoleon was hoping to do, and he was actually a democratic socialist. Most of the yellow vests are older people, and they've been there, they've done that. They were there in 1968. They are more mature, they are more seasoned, and they really, really care about their country. I even a year or so, well, before COVID, I even saw a report that the CGT, the biggest union in France, were actually attacking yellow vest protesters during a protest in Paris. So the it's you can see how much the left fears the yellow vest, because the yellow vest prove that the left is essentially just an empty fossil, and it's just not very effective. I'm disgusted with them, to be honest with you. Very disgusted.
Well, how do you see this, Jeff? Is it basically, in your perspective, this movement with these people we're seeing on the streets right now, those who are leading it, because I'm sure many of the people who are on the streets really are seeking reforms, but those who are leading it, basically they're just offering some type of controllable alternative to let the people let off steam, as opposed to making actual changes in the system?
Exactly. The people out there, I admire them. I know they have the best of intentions. I know they feel like they're doing the right thing. The reform, it is true. My wife and I can tell you it's a mess. The retirement system in France is awful. Compared to the United States whatever you want to say about the United States, the Social Security Administration is the best run government bureaucracy probably in the world. It is a mess here. There is a there are two tiers. There are the government bureaucrats, the government employees who have massive retirements, and then there's the private sector and entrepreneurs and wives and husbands, people poor people who get nothing. And so that's why they're trying to keep the retirement age at 60, because their retirements are so low. The pay they get in retirement is so low, it's horrible. I could give you story after story after story of people who worked like galley slaves all their lives in the private sector, and their retirements like 1,200, 1,500 euros a month. What is that? I mean, you can't live on that in France. So I admire what they're doing, but the problem is, of course, Macron is a Goldman Sachs, Wall Street, City of London, neoliberal, and they want to reform it. What they'll do is they'll reform it down to where people are going to even get less, and raise the age at the same time. So it's not an enviable situation for your average working class French person. Again, my hat's off to all of those people who are out there today. I think their efforts are misguided. I think what they ought to do, instead of bothering people like us, where I can't take the train, to go see the doctor or whatever, they ought to go surround the Élysée where Macron lives. They ought to go surround the Central Bank of France, and they ought to surround the legislature, the Chamber of Deputies, and the Senate. All are in Paris, and don't leave, and blockade those three institutions. That would probably cause some changes to be made. So, but they don't do that, and I don't know why.
And on that note, I appreciate you being with us.